What's up guys, Zaguni here, and today we're going to be talking AoD. Pretty much all the guides on YouTube are like at least 2 years old, so I figured I could put together something that's a little more up to date. So this video is going to be geared more towards 7-man teams, however the concepts and strategies really can be applied in anything outside of a mass. In this video I'll be covering who AoD is, the requirements, my own suggestions, the different roles, and really just the dynamic of the encounter. That said, let's get to it. Next Angel of Death is level 10,000. She has 3 million life points, attacks with melee and magic, and is immune to stuns and poison. For this encounter, you'll need a frozen key and a set of ancient ceremonial robes. As for my suggestions, I recommend max combat, or at least max offensive stats with 90 plus defense and 96 summoning, as you'll need either a Ripper Demon or a Pack Yak. Next, you'll want to have 106 Herblore, or at least be boostable to 106 for Elder Overloads. If you're maging or ranging, you're going to need Sunshine or Death Swiftness, along with planted feet switches to extend those abilities. You will also need a flanking switch, along with like your basic PvM invention perks, so like Crackling 4, Biting 4, so on and so forth. And finally, you'll need Dominion Mines, which are obtained through the Dominion Tower after completing like 400 matches, and I forget the specifics, but you can find it on the Rune Wiki. The average 7-man team includes 4 roles: base tank, hammer, chinner, and 4 minion tanks. So base is pretty self-explanatory. It can be done using any style, but mage is preferred. And your job will be to tank next, help the Glaciers and Cougar Malks during Phase 2, Vuln 1.8 after Phase 2, lure at 600k to avoid giving your teammates shadows, and Vulning and hammering next at 600k after the pillars. Next we have our hammer. The hammer essentially plays a big role in phasing next from Phase 2 into Phase 3 without getting second elements. Additionally, the hammer is responsible for helping the Umbra and Fumus amalgamations, as well as hammering next at around 1.8 million life points. The next role we'll be going over is the Chinner, which is a ranged role, and for this role you'll need to have Ingenuity of the Humans. That's because you'll need to hammer next at the very start of the kill. Next you'll be helping the Umbra and Glacies Amalgs during Phase 2, and lastly you want to kill the minions using mechanized Chinchampas as quickly as possible. The last role that we're going to go over is the Minion Tank. The Minion Tank has 2 main jobs, the first being to kill its amalgamation during Phase 2, and the second is to tank the minion. After taking down the amalgamation, a level 750 minion with 150k life points will spawn. If the Minion Tank, however, fails to take down the amalgamation, a level 1000 minion with 300k life points will spawn. Teams are usually set up with 2 mage minion tanks and 2 melee minion tanks. The 2 mage minion tanks will take Umbra and Glacies, while the 2 melee minion tanks take Fumus and Cougar. The Umbra minion tank is responsible for Vulning next at the start of the kill, as well as Vulning the Umbra minion. The reason behind this is because you always want Umbra to be the first minion to die. The Glacies minion tank is responsible for Vulning the pillars during the pillar phase. Lastly, the melee minion tanks play a large role in successfully phasing Phase 2 without getting second elements. Now that we've gone over the roles, let's take a look at the fight dynamic. The AoD encounter is broken down into 4 main phases. Phase 1 begins once the fight starts, with next at 3 million life points and ends at 2.1 million life points. Phase 2 is from 2.1 million to 1.8 million life points. Phase 3 is from 1.8 million to 600k life points, and the last phase is kind of broken into 2 parts. For the first part of the pillar phase, next will become invulnerable. During this time, the 4 pillars in each corner of the arena will become attackable in the order in which their corresponding minion died. While this is going on, the base will lure next to the last attackable pillars so that the rest of the team can soul split and heal up on the other pillars until they get to the last one. Once the last pillar is taken down, you'll enter the last phase and finish the kill from there. Now let's get into starting the kill. This graphic shows where each role should be positioned at the start of the kill. So the base is on the west, right on that east-west center line, and each minion tank is in their respective quadrant. And the hammer and the chinner are across from the base on the east side. As for mining the quadrant, each minion tank will receive 2 sets of mines except for the Umbra minion tank. Each minion tank places their own set of mines in their own quadrant. The base will set their mines in the Cougar quadrant, the hammer in the Fumis quadrant, and the chinner in the Glacies quadrant. When the elements spawn, the hammer and the chinner both should move into the Umbra quadrant unless the Umbra quadrant is the element quad, as both roles are supposed to help with the Umbra Reaver going into phase 2. So phase 1 is really straightforward, and there's really only one mechanic to deal with, or 2 if your DPS is lacking. So the first mechanic of phase 1 is the elements. The elements start once Nex suddenly stops attacking the base tank and faces directly into one of the quadrants. Nex will then jump up into the air and spawn Reavers in all the quadrants not targeted by the elements. At the same time, icicles will form along the north and west lines. You don't want to stand on them because they do damage. Once the Reavers and icicles spawn, Nex will attack the quadrant she's targeted with 3 magic hits. These magic hits do hit pretty hard, so some of the damage can be negated by a debilitate and a disruption shield. The rest of the minion tanks at this part want to go ahead and bind your Reavers and get back on Nex. Depending on the kill speed, if your team's fast enough, you can go ahead and just kill her right away. And if you're melee int, you can go ahead and just ignore the Reaver. The second mechanic, the Shadow Orbs, is pretty avoidable as long as you do enough damage. But in case you do get them, they look something like what you'll see in the video. So she's throwing her arms up and those red things are falling, those are the Shadow Orbs. And once they land, they don't disappear until the end of phase 2. And basically what they do is just take base damage as long as you stand on them. So if you end up getting them, just let all 3 of them drop, then move 1 step away from them and continue to attack next. Now let's jump into phase 2. Phase 2 begins when Nex spawns her amalgamations. Now there are 2 things that are really going on during this phase. On one hand, it's a race to get Nex down to 1.8 million life points as soon as possible. And on the other hand, it's clearing amalgamations before they spawn 300k minions. So all in all, a clean phase 2 is really about helping each other out. So right here you can see the amalgamation spawn now. And as you can see, everyone's kind of focusing on Nex at the moment before they get on their amalgs. And once Nex is just about phased, then the other roles go to help the minion tanks in clearing their amalgamations. Now that your amalgamation's down, you want to position yourself right about here. This way, your minion aggroes you and not the other minion tank if they surge before you. When it comes time to lure, you want to stand right in that spot where the green line is and then surge across. Once your minion is centered on Nex, you can move back behind her to flank. So in the actual kill, it should look something like this. Now we enter into phase 3. During this phase, there are 3 mechanics: the smokes, the ices, and the pulls. The smokes are similar to Vindicta's fire. They don't hit particularly hard, but they do hit rapidly. When you get targeted with smoke, you'll receive this message on your screen. After receiving this message, Nex will do 2 more auto attacks. Wherever you're standing during Nex's second auto attack is where the smoke will drop. So after that second attack, go ahead and run 2 paces back. Since I was basing in this video, I dropped the smoke a little bit different from where you normally would. Ideally, you would want to place your smokes like this. The east smoke is 2 paces south of the center, and the north is directly up the center. That's how you want to position them. Here's an example of how not to handle your smokes.
Bruh.
The next mechanic is the Ice Prison. This mechanic isn't particularly threatening, but it can ruin a kill if not handled properly. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get any footage of me personally getting iced, but what happens is you'll get a message similar to the smoke message, and your screen will look frozen. When this happens, you want to freedom and move away from the DPS pile. If it happens when you're close to phasing 600k, you want to go ahead and surge and bladed dive close to the first pillar that you'll be going to. After you've moved away from the DPS pile, the ice will form and you'll be stuck in place until your teammates come and free you. If they don't free you, the ice prism will start a bleed on you, which can be negated through the protect melee prayer curse. The last phase 3 mechanic is the smoke pool. So when Nex says, even I cannot control the element of smoke, let us see if you can, she's casting a smoke pool. So really all this mechanic does is just do typeless damage to everyone in the arena. So basically you just eat up in preparation for it and ignore it. The only times when you really need to pay attention to the pool is if you have multiple teammates who've died. Like if you're 6 or 5 or less, then you should probably send people in to take the pool. Pretty much everyone except the base tank. So yeah, besides the smokes and ices, for phase 3 you're pretty much just tanking minions and DPSing Nex. At the very start of the phase, the Chinner will want to go ahead and depth swiftness and equip their chins and start taking down the minions. The minion order that you want to go for would be Umbra, Glacies, Cougar, Fumus, and that goes from southeast counterclockwise to southwest. The reason for this is because the Umbra pillar is the most annoying one to deal with and the one most likely to get you killed because of the shadow traps, which I'll go into detail about here shortly. However, the point that I'm getting at here is that the Chinner wants to start working on the minions as soon as phase 3 starts, and the order which the minions die in is the order which the pillars will become attackable. So if Umbra dies first, Glacies dies second, Cougar dies third, and Fumus dies fourth, then that'll be the pillar order. You'll go from the shadow pillar to the ice pillar to the blood pillar to the smoke pillar. So now let's get into the pillar phase. The pillar phase starts once Nex reaches 600k life points. At this point, the base will lure Nex out of the center to the last pillar, while the rest of the team surges to the first pillar. Nex will also switch to mage attacks only at this point of the fight. The shadow pillar, or the Umbra pillar, is in the southeast. This pillar's mechanic is the shadow trap. You usually don't get these unless the base either lures incorrectly or you don't leave the center quick enough during the 600k phase. If you do end up getting these, you'll get 4 to 5 of them, and really all you want to do is just avoid stepping on them and avoid leaving them under other people because they hurt a lot. Next is the ice pillar, or the Glacies pillar, located in the northeast. This pillar's mechanic is the ice screen. All you do to handle the ice screen is just freedom. If you don't, it'll end up stunning you and sticking a bleed similar to the ice prison, which will kill you if you don't freedom out of it. The Cougar, or blood pillar, allows Nex to heal from her attacks. There's not really any mechanic to it, just kill it. And the last pillar is the smoke pillar, or the Fumus pillar. This pillar's mechanic is the virus, which poisons you, and you won't really notice that if you're using salves. But it poisons you, it lowers your overload timer, and it drains your prayer points. Really the best way to handle it is just to keep an eye on your prayer points. That's the main thing that'll get me if I'm not paying attention. So the main mechanic to look out for during the pillar phase and during phase 4 is the one-hit bomb. So when you get the one-hit bomb, you'll get a message saying Nex has marked you to take the full force of the element. When you get this message, a bar will appear over your head. If you don't make it to the center with the first bar by the time that it fills, you'll get insta-killed. Once the first bar fills in the center, you will get a second one. Now the second one you don't want to drop in the center, but instead somewhere away from the DPS pile and away from the base tank. Once it fills, it's going to drop a bomb wherever you were standing whenever it filled. The bomb does tick damage to anything standing in it, so that's why you want to place it away from everyone else. Just be mindful that you can get multiple bombs, so you can end up going there like 3-4 times in a row. Always drop the first one in the center and the second one away from everyone else. Once the last pillar is down, that's really the last mechanic you have to look out for. The rest of the fight is just getting her from 600k life points to 0, and that's it. So now let's go ahead and look at a kill all the way through. You always want to start with full adren so you can ult from the get-go. So yeah, you pretty much just start with like a standard Zerk rotation or DPS rotation, and you just keep doing that until elements. So note here that even though we skip the Reavers and the Icicles, the minion tank will still take the mage hits. As the Amalgam spawn, you'll notice that the minion tanks and pretty much all the roles are still on next until she phases, which is when she says that line right there. After she's phased, everyone helps the MTs finish their Amalgs. The MTs go ahead and lure from there, and then it's back to DPSing next down. Here you can see Nex is becoming attackable again, and the Chen has dropped his Death Swiftness and is now getting started on taking out the minions. You'll also notice Melee is using a Scythe at this part. That's to help the Chenner by using Cleave and Hurricane to take out the minions as quickly as possible. So right here we're hitting the 600k mark, and I went ahead and lured Nex away into the last pillar, while the rest of the team is taking out the pillars. And there you can see some shadow traps. As base, you'll pretty much deal with every mechanic. On a side note, you'll also want to wait until the shadow traps are done dropping before you try to resonate. As long as the Glacis pillar is still alive, if you're not praying Protect from Mage, there's a good chance that you'll get stunned. And one of the quickest ways to die is to get stunned over a shadow trap. So now Nex is debuffed and we're ready to finish the kill. So yeah guys, that's pretty much it. I'm sure there's a few things that I probably missed, but I hope that the video helps nonetheless. I'll be leaving some links into some AoD discords in the description. If you guys have any comments, questions, or suggestions, go ahead and leave them in the comments section. Thanks for watching and good luck at AoD.